Okay, family, coming back on with another video. This is part 4 of what is the truth. Okay, so let's continue to listen in. One thing I want to make a note before we go all the way in is that he had mentioned about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I just wanted to say I found it very odd that they found the Dead Sea Scrolls a year before they moved into the land in Israel. To me, it's like if it was being set up to say that, these are actually writings that giving us even more further leadway to go on the land. And it's odd that, they still have it under lock and key where ones can't see it. I just feel like it's just still a lot of hidden stuff behind it. So to me, it's a question mark, but I just wanted to add that in there before we go any further. And I did move it back a little bit, but I'm going to try to move it back over this way. So he was talking about that they created in reference to talking about the Messiah. So that Titus and his father was claiming to be God. His father was Vansavian. And then Titus was actually the son of God, which is the son of his father, which if his father is considered to be God or call himself God, he's the son. He will be the son of God. And then how the Messiah storyline mirrors his in so many ways. Okay, here we go.
Jesus is foreseeing Titus, who is the real Messiah, is not at all far-fetched. It just requires that you actually recognize sort of these basic historical realities.
Well, weren't there other characters that Jesus was based on, or were there other Jesuses?
There were a whole series of Christs during this era, and you get into, the Gospels are complicated, and in my book I go on I show the most basic level of them is the fact that Jesus his ministry is a type of Titus Flavius, but in fact it also looks forward to another Messiah who is a Jewish one who appeared during the Jewish war, whose name is Eleazar. But at that point, you're in some very sophisticated typology, and it's in a show like this, it would be hard to get into it. I would just recommend, if people are curious about that, to read the book. But the really simple truth that people can see, as far as identifying Jesus and as a type of Titus Flavius, the most simple one is to start with the beginning. And Jesus says at the Sea of Galilee that you will be fishers of men. And if you begin to read Titus's campaign in Josephus, you'll see that his first event is at the same location, and it's the same event. He fishes for men at the Sea of Galilee. And this then starts a long series of events that go through Jesus's ministry and are replicated in Titus's campaign. And once you see the conceptual relationship, which is of course hidden, it's not completely overt. You have to have a little bit of thinking. But once you see it, you'll recognize it's deliberate because it's occurring in the same sequence. In other words, the most transparent aspect of the Jesus-Moses typology, the thing that makes it so visible, is that the events that are linked are occurring in the same sequence. If you look at literary parallels, like that are circumstantial, for example, the famous ones between Lincoln and Kennedy,
right,
they don't occur in the same sequence. They simply can't, because if they are accidental, then they are subject to the rules of probability concerning random events, and they have to just occur at random. So when you have sequences of unusual events, this is highly unusual and strongly suggestive that you've got a deliberate pattern, not an accidental one. This is why DNA testing enables people to be put into prison, is because when you have unusual events, in that case it's 1 times out of 4, and if they occur over a long sequence in the exact same order, you know that one sample is from the same person as the other sample was taken from. Well, that shows you that the Jesus-Moses typology is deliberate, and anyone who reads the book and sees how vivid the parallels are and how absolutely clear-cut they are will recognize that the relationship between Jesus and Titus is not accidental, and that it's a deliberate literary event.
Titus's military campaign, as told to us through War of the Jews by Flavius Josephus, is a mirror of the New Testament?
It's the basis of it. The Gospels, you have the four, books in the Gospels, but there's actually a fifth book to the Gospels, and that's the Wars of the Jews, which is the history written by Flavius Josephus of Titus's campaign. And what's interesting is that book, though it's no longer recognized essentially as part of the canon, was attached to some of the very early versions of the Gospels.
Right.
They actually had the...
So family, so you heard that. I went looking for this today, and it ended up in this video here, that Josephus, that, he had a fifth gospel that was in the Bible, but was going back, I'm not sure what he said. I was out of the room at the time, but remember the original Bible that came out in 1611, it even had the real King James Stewart in there. He, is known to be a so-called black man, of tribe Judah. And then it had maps in it, and so forth. So I do have access to an older Bible, but it's not as old as like one of the first versions. When I say first versions, back in 1611, but in 1969, it has all the books that are in the Apocrypha and some others that are not seen in as far as on the internet even today, I want to say. So still yet, let me back up. I think Sirach is actually ecclesiastic, so that is actually shown in there. Then Revelation is called the apocalypse. So that's in the Bible too. So I just want to be certain about that. But that just tell you that Josephus played a big part, and they uphold Josephus. You see what I'm saying? Anything that they gravitate to, anything they uphold, anything they run toward. So even with Saul, not the King Saul, Shaul, that ones call it. People that they gravitate to and they love the quote and they love it. Those are ones that we need to really look at, because it is question marks and is their gods that they uphold and they uplift. So for that to be in the Bible about Josephus writing a fifth gospel, really? But they took it out? Okay, family.
Josephus work with them. And the reason they did that is because the early Christian scholars recognized that all of Jesus' prophecies, his overt prophecies, are coming to pass in the war that Titus waged against the Jews. In other words, Jesus says, hey, I foresee Jerusalem encircled with a wall. Very specific event, encircling a city with a wall. Very unusual, it's not totally unusual, but it's reasonably unusual. And yet Titus accomplishes that. Jesus sees that the temple is raised. He says, I see not one stone atop another. Titus essentially, levels the temple. He predicts woe for very specific Galilean towns. Titus levels all of those towns. So the overt prophetic relationship between Jesus' ministry and Titus's campaign was understood from very early on, that hey, everything that Jesus is predicting, Titus is bringing about. And Jesus says that this is all going to come to pass, all of these events, this apocalyptic sequence of events that he envisions, is all going to come about during the time when the Son of Man makes a visitation. And he's using the expression the Son of Man in the context that Daniel uses it, which is as the Messiah. So you have, from the very early beginnings of Christian scholarship, you have an understanding that Jesus was predicting the events of Titus's campaign. And you also have, from the historians of the era, the clear-cut declaration that Titus saw himself as the Messiah. So it's that Titus was simply the only individual in history that could have been the Son of Man that Jesus was envisioning. It probably couldn't have been Jesus because he didn't show up to actually, at least to date, to work any of these events. But Titus did. Titus fulfilled all of the events that the Son of Man was supposed to have brought about during his visitation. And Titus flatly claimed to be the Jewish Messiah. So when you start out with that understanding, which unfortunately is not an understanding that is widely known even by Christian scholars at this point, but when you start out with these things which are completely clear-cut and which are demonstrable to anyone, then you look at the relationship, the conceptual relationship between Jesus' ministry and Titus' campaign, and it is completely crystal clear that the literature of the Gospels was created to envision the Titus's campaign and to proclaim him as the Jewish Messiah.
Okay, let's go further into the anti-Semitism in the New Testament.
Okay. Before we go there, and of course she wants to understand that because of course she considers herself as a Jew and want to understand where this, as far as anti-Semitism comes from. But before we go there, so Josephus actually, what it was, actually shown in the documentary, and he didn't mention it right then. I don't think he's going to mention it, if not by now, if he didn't do it by now, but that Josephus actually was on the side of the Israelites as if he was one. But when the war actually went on, they end up, having it to where they took him as a prisoner of war, and then he flipped and said that he'll help them against our people. So the writings that they took back to Rome, they took it, and he was able to, read through it and went over and cover it with them. And to this day, it's known that it's locked up. So I know in Ezra, 2nd Ezra and 14, it says that Father put a spirit on Ezra and 5 others that they actually compiled 204 books. So we know that's not all that we have access to this day. And 70 of it was to be given to one with wisdom. And then I want to say was for something like, say, later as time, unfolds. So Josephus actually, brought this on to Titus by saying that, you are the Messiah of the Israelites. And then another part that was not, I'm saying he did not say in this, is that Vespasian and also, which is the father, the son, which was Titus, wanted the Israelites to bow down to them. But like we all know, all of our people wasn't all about, not keeping the commandments. Some weren't, but they knew that they weren't going to bow down to a statue. They weren't going to bow down to an image. So, that was another reason for them to create a dynamic in this lineup so that even to this day, people will be worshiping them and not even knowing. They thinking they're worshiping Jesus Christ, but they literally worshiping the Son and the Son of God. And so that's why we have to be mindful and careful to circle around, what the Messiah part of it, because every time just say that our Messiah did not come yet, according to what I'm seeing, did not come yet, and Father's sending him, but we mocking the Most High. We blasphemy and saying and giving homage or honor to someone that is not even here yet. You understand? And some people are idolizing. Some people are praying to the image or that deity that they created. So I'm just saying, say he did come, but what was the reason why the Most High would send a Messiah that will, die and not in the light of dying for us? And that's another whole storyline about dying for us, for our sins that we still can sin this day. We still need to repent. We still not in our rightful place. We still don't have a king over us, as we had back from Saul going all the way up to Zedekiah. So family, again, let's really take this in, and I pray that that you could actually take a moment to seek the Most High for yourself and go deeper as we should be doing. Here we go.
Was this so Titus can be successful? What was it about?
Anti-Semitism, in my mind, was created out of very personal reasons, and it didn't have to be. It would have been possible to have the pacifist version of Judaism that wasn't so specifically anti-Semitic as the Gospels are. In the Gospels, you have the famous passage where mob is demanding that Pontius Pilate give them Jesus, and when he says, "Okay, I will do this, but I consider it just," and the mob of Jews out, "Well, his blood."
Okay, family, I'm gonna cut this off. Sorry about that, but it's actually kind of buff in there, so we'll cut this off and then come back in another set.